an open-air cafe in Soho with a stunning view. As I parked the minivan on the street, I heard the voice of my daughter, Emily, who had arrived earlier. "Ah, that's my dad's van. He uses it for his business." Then, interrupting her, a raspy male voice chimed in. "How inappropriate to arrive in such a vehicle. Is your father a high school dropout working in a warehouse?" Emily looked taken aback by these remarks. The man with the raspy voice appeared to have indulged in a few drinks, smiling with a flushed face. It had been some time since I last met someone who found such tasteless jokes amusing. After putting a parking ticket on the minivan, I approached the man. Opening my jacket, which had been tailored just a couple of days ago, I extended my business card towards him with a friendly gesture. "Here, I'm the CEO of a company that generates $50 million in revenue annually." John looked surprised. He was frantically checking the company name on the business card on his phone. Understandable. In John's view, someone driving a minivan couldn't possibly be more successful than him. And so, I began sharing my life story, almost as if I was introducing myself. "My name is Tom, and I'm a 63-year-old business owner. The business has expanded considerably, and we now have a significant number of employees, but it was a long journey to reach this point where I could share my story. Let me take you back to my early days. Born in the 1960s as the son of a struggling textile mill worker in the Midwest, I endured a challenging childhood. At that time, affordable and durable cotton products were being imported from abroad in large quantities, leading to the decline of local mills. With such meager earnings, it was tough to provide for the family, and there were days when my father would catch a chicken that wandered into our yard for our meal that evening. I've had to do it a few times under my father's orders, and the sensation and sound still haunt me, making me reminisce about those times whenever I see chicken. Eventually, unable to make ends meet with just the mill's income, my parents started saying, "We're going to a community meeting," leaving me alone as they went out. They wouldn't return until late at night, and by morning, I'd find a stack of flyers by the door. They were invitations to join a new spiritual religious group. Looking back, it seems the incentive was paid by the group for recruiting new members. What began as a means of survival slowly consumed my parents' minds with the ideology. During every election, my mother would fervently say, with a fervent look, "Those who have faith will be saved. So, if you support this candidate, all will be well. Yes, by relinquishing your desires, you can find peace. So you should." Everything was like this. There's no way I could live a good life in a house like this. I needed to leave the house. I'm thinking of moving out. Why? Isn't it enough to be here? I can't stand it anymore. Is it a lack of faith? Did you pray today? Prayer keeps unnecessary thoughts at bay. I'm leaving anyway. With that, I packed my things and left. It was a night just before my high school graduation, at 18. The breeze was brisk. It's not that I had nowhere to go. I had noted down my uncle's address and phone number. My uncle, Steve, who lived in Nebraska and was a bachelor, had been concerned about our situation since I was young. He often said, "Call me if anything happens. I think I understand what you're going through." I dialed his number with shaking hands and heard my uncle's deep voice answer. "Hello, hello, who is this?" "It's me, Tom." "Tom, what's going on at this time?" "Actually, I've left home." My uncle paused, seemingly in thought, but quickly responded. "Got it. Head over here. I've got you covered." Not long after, I took a local train to Nebraska and ended up staying with my uncle. He worked as an electrician and was usually out during the day. The house was cluttered with various tools and equipment like pliers and wrenches. Among these, a strange box-shaped device in the back of the room caught my attention. This device had knobs of different sizes. One day, while my uncle was out, I couldn't resist turning the knobs. Suddenly, a loud, unfamiliar noise, accompanied by intermittent beeps, filled the room. Interested? Whoa! I jumped, caught off guard by my uncle's voice from behind, and felt embarrassed as if I'd been caught in the act. However, my uncle looked at me with excitement. It's called ham radio. With this, you can reach out to people across the globe. Pretty cool, huh? With people all over the world. Yeah, exactly. You can talk to someone halfway around the world through invisible waves. If you're interested, I can teach you everything from the basics. From that point on, I was captivated by ham radio. Whether day or night, I stayed close to my uncle, intrigued by this novel device and the voices from distant lands. When he was away, I'd spend nights engrossed in radio chats, often not realizing dawn had broken. Around this time, I began assisting with my uncle's work. I'd accompany him in his minivan, traveling across Nebraska for various electrical tasks. Since the minivan lacked a car radio, my uncle would bring along a portable radio, using it to teach me various lessons during our rides. I learned many of life's important lessons during those conversations in the minivan. Remember, Tom, the key is to think clearly. No matter the challenge, assess the situation, pinpoint the issues, come up with theories, and test them out. Master this, and you'll hardly ever find yourself at a loss. Yet, my uncle, who lived by these words, met with a tragic accident at work. The details were vague, but it seemed he died trying to save a coworker who had slipped up. The grief and frustration were overwhelming. It was a cruel twist of fate that my uncle, a lifelong electrician, met his end due to electricity. With no other kin, I inherited his house and minivan. So, I was on my own once again. But this time was different from when I had left my family. I had acquired my uncle's electrical skills and, more importantly, his work ethic and passion. Finding work was easy. During that period, the semiconductor boom was in full swing. In the U.S., electrical industry was flourishing. I interviewed at several companies, and after demonstrating my skills, I was in high demand. Eventually, I joined the largest company everyone knew of, though looking back, that might have been a mistake. I adapted to the job within months. Inspecting parts on a conveyor belt was straightforward, nothing like the complexities of electrical work. But the real issue lay elsewhere. It was the constant berating and physical reprimands from the manager, Daniel. Daniel would often halt the production line in a foul mood and single me out. Tom, over here. Yes. What's with the attitude? You seem disinterested in your work. Yes, sorry. You might think this job's a no-brainer. Don't get ahead of yourself. I'm the one who hired you. You're not quite there yet. Yes, sorry. I don't want your apologies. Show it through your actions, I was told, followed by a slap in the face. When things were going well, it would be 2 slaps back and forth. This had become the usual sequence of events. Still, the pay was good, so somehow I managed to keep working. There was another reason I managed to keep working. It was meeting a woman who was in charge of the factory's accounting at the time. Her name was Ashley. Ashley would subtly show concern for me right after I received a punch from Daniel, offering ointment discreetly so no one would see. I always see what's happening. It must be hard. No, I'm used to it. Plus, the pay is good. If I think of it as including compensation for the punches, it's bearable. That's too harsh. Please don't overdo it. There was a time when I got a cut on my lip from a slap from Daniel, and Ashley gave me a handkerchief. Tucked inside the handkerchief was a note with her contact information and a message saying, "Please contact me anytime if there's anything I can do for you." My encounter with Ashley definitely brought some salvation. There's no doubt that she helped ease the depression I felt after my uncle passed away. But then, a decisive moment came. "Hey, Who did this? One day, Daniel stopped the production line and shouted loud enough for all the employees to hear. He was holding a part that was significantly more bent than the standard. If no one confesses now, I'll lay everyone out. I knew who had checked that part. It was a new coworker standing next to me, who was biting his lip and trembling as I glanced sideways. If I stayed silent, everyone present would definitely receive a slap. Thinking this, I instinctively raised my hand. It was me. What? I'm sorry, I missed it. You realize what you've done, right? Yes, I'm truly sorry. Daniel stood in front of me and slapped my cheek. Not satisfied with just that, he turned around and delivered a knee kick aimed at my solar plexus. Unable to breathe, I clenched my eyes shut, and tears naturally started to flow. Oh, crying now, even now, you're playing the tragic hero. Well, with that face, you're too ugly for it anyway. With a victorious look, Daniel kicked me in the solar plexus with the tip of his shoe as I lay on the ground and then walked away. That night, as I was cleaning up alone, Ashley stayed until the end. Hi. Hello. Daniel is terrible, isn't he? He didn't have to say it like that. It's okay. It would have taken longer if things continued as they were. We were already behind schedule. You didn't actually do it, did you? Huh? I saw Bob, who works next to your line, inspecting parts unsteadily. Someone had to take the responsibility. But it didn't have to be you. It's okay. I won't be here much longer anyway. What do you mean? Maybe I was being self-destructive. But thinking about resigning was true. I'm thinking about leaving this company. There are more interesting things out there. I want to do what I love. Ashley was a woman who chose her words carefully. I think that's a wonderful idea. I want you to do what you love. I believe in you, and I think you can trust yourself too. But I'll be lonely if you're gone, Ashley said, lowering her face. If you're willing, why don't we quit the company together, and then let's start a new factory of our own. Even in the dim factory, I could see Ashley's face flush with color. If we could do that, I'd be so happy. Thus, Ashley and I decided to resign from the company and start a new factory together. Then came 1989. The year the Berlin Wall fell, Ashley and I got married. As an aside, the year after I left, an assault case occurred at the factory, and that factory manager was apparently arrested. It might have been a matter of time, sooner or later. In 1990, Ashley and I established a factory that produced semiconductor components. I took on the roles of both salesman and technician. Ashley handled all accounting tasks. However, at first, the business didn't go smoothly, and we could barely make ends meet through the electrical work I took on as an individual, rather than through the factory's orders. It was no surprise. The American semiconductor industry, led by companies like Intel and Texas Instruments from the 70s to the 80s, was conceding its position to giants like TSMC in Taiwan and Samsung in Korea by the 90s, showing a downward trend. Considering the cost of assembly, it was impossible for a fledgling small to medium-sized company to afford the equipment needed to produce cutting-edge components. So we specialized in manufacturing parts with a focus on technical skill rather than production capacity. I never thought the skills I acquired in electrical work would come in handy here. Then, whether it was due to that strategy or just sheer luck, orders gradually started coming in from companies that had heard about the skilled craftsmen at our factory. It might have been the most fulfilling days of my life. I would wake up early, go to the factory, and silently grip the soldering iron by myself. Or I would face the machines that polished the components. I would come home late at night, barely eat, and then collapse into sleep alongside Ashley. On our rare days off, I would devote myself to the amateur radio I inherited from my uncle. I think Ashley was very understanding to accept a husband like me. In the midst of our non-stop daily routine, Ashley and I were blessed with a child. It's a girl. Hey, what do you think we should name her? How about Emily? It sounds good. Yes. And so, we named our newborn girl Emily. Emily was born healthy. But it might have been around this time Ashley became ill. I'm sorry to say, but your wife's condition has reached stage 3. At this stage, surgery is not very effective. Ashley had suddenly complained of an unusual abdominal pain while at work and was urgently admitted to a nearby hospital. When I heard the news while out, I rushed to the hospital. I remember Dr. Davis's voice sounding unusually clinical as he explained the situation to me. Dr. Davis informed me that Ashley was suffering from late-stage pancreatic cancer. Can Ashley live? I can't say for certain. The 5-year survival rate for stage 3 pancreatic cancer patients is about 7%. Why Ashley? Dr. Davis didn't answer my question, but instead started writing something on the chart and preparing for the next patient. I'm sorry, I've caused such a fuss. When I visited with our little Emily, Ashley was lying on the hospital bed, smiling weakly. Dressed in hospital clothes, petite Ashley looked even smaller. Don't apologize, you've done nothing wrong. But I still have unfinished accounting work at the factory. Don't worry about it, it's okay. When a loved one falls ill, one realizes the preciousness of everyday life. Ashley's illness made me realize how happy I had been. But why did it have to be Ashley? Emily, make sure you support your dad properly. Even young Emily seemed to understand the situation and smiled innocently, saying, yes. And Tom, believe in yourself. I believe that what you're trying to do is right. Stop it, don't be so formal. No, I want to say it while I can. Ashley's face was serious. Her battle with illness did not last long. Perhaps that's what Ashley wanted. But now, there's no way to know. Ashley's face was peaceful in her final moments. Ashley's glasses, which she wore in life, were placed in her urn, and I felt I had lost everything. Had everything I had done been a mistake? I couldn't save Ashley. I had forced her to struggle. Perhaps she wasn't happy. For a while, I couldn't focus on anything, not even my hobbies like tinkering with machines or amateur radio. The world seemed gray. Suddenly, while looking at the factory machinery, I wondered what would happen if I stuck my head inside. Then, those machines I had once loved and immersed myself in appeared devilish to me. During those gloomy days, I started to drown in alcohol. I couldn't move my body even though I needed to work. I spent days drinking from morning and zoning out. My savings ran out, and I borrowed money from a consumer loan machine that had become popular without telling Emily, who was attending school. I was surprised at how easily I could borrow money because my credit was good, which made me feel even more lost. I even considered gambling with the money as a faster way out. Or I contemplated the worst-case scenarios. When I returned home in a daze, the noise from the amateur radio was on. Perhaps the switch had been accidentally turned on. But when I went to the room with the radio, I found Emily, who was supposed to be at school, standing in front of the desk looking apologetic. I just touched it a little, and it wouldn't stop. I found Emily irresistibly dear at that moment. As soon as I thought that, tears overflowed. I'm sorry, I haven't been able to do anything, even though I have you. But Emily didn't dwell on my sentimentality and kept staring at the radio. Dad, what is this? Oh, this is a magical machine that lets you talk to people all over the world. With people all over the world. Yes. You can have conversations with invisible signals all the way to the other side of the earth. If you want to know more, I'll teach you from scratch. Really? Teach me. Listening to the sounds coming from the radio, Emily's eyes sparkled, and I saw my own reflection in her. Yes, Uncle Steve. I remembered my uncle. What my uncle had taught me in the pickup truck. Listen, Tom, The key is to use your head calmly, no matter how tough the situation. Analyze the current state, identify the issues, formulate hypotheses, and test them. If you can do that, you won't easily be defeated. The grayness of my daily life seemed to regain its color bit by bit. From that moment, I temporarily suspended my electrical contracting work and shifted the core business of my company to electronic component manufacturing. I set my sights on computer components. I believed that as household computers became more common, there would come a time when everyone would carry a small computer with them. Although we had fewer than 10 employees, they all respected my decision. About a decade after we decided to shift our operations, my factory had made a name for itself in the industry for its high technical capabilities. The rapid growth we experienced in this short period was significantly influenced by the overall growth of the tech industry, especially with the emergence of cell phones globally. We had been developing small components for computers, but we adapted them for cell phones due to the tremendous demand for these parts. At that time, my daughter, Emily, was about to enter high school. She had been studying at a local public middle school and stood out academically even there. As a parent, I was proud that Emily consistently scored perfect marks on her tests. One day, Emily brought home a brochure from a high school. "Dad, actually, I want to go to this school." Looking at the brochure, it was a prestigious private high school affiliated with a well-known university. I was happy that my daughter was thinking about her life on her own. At the same time, I thought that perhaps it was also a parent's duty to support their child through such exams. Why not? Go ahead and apply. Really? Can I? Is there a reason you shouldn't? But what about the tuition fees? Understanding Emily's concern, I reassured her. Don't worry about the money. Times have changed. The economy is good now. One child's tuition fee is nothing to worry about. Emily's face lit up with genuine happiness upon hearing this. And so, Emily successfully passed the high school entrance exams. But this also meant that for the next few years, we would be spending a significant amount annually on tuition fees. I braced myself for this. However, my worries were unfounded. One day, as I was heading to work, one of the employees was frantically on the phone. I wondered if it was another strange complaint, but it turned out to be extremely positive news. "What's going on? Mr. Johnson, it's incredible. Please don't be shocked. A major international company wants to use the parts we made in their new cell phones." What? That company, now a household name in the tech industry, was only known by a few enthusiasts at the time. Yet, being their supplier would be a game changer for us. What did they say on the phone? They said they'll be in the US soon and want to meet in person to discuss. We can sit around. Let's get ready. Things went smoothly, and I formally signed a contract with that company. The contract was worth millions of dollars. This sum was staggering, but knowing I could provide for Emily brought immense joy. The idea that something I created was in the hands of so many people still amazed me. "Uncle Steve, I did it. Ashley, we did it." I reported in front of their graves that all our hardships had finally paid off. I couldn't help but feel as if both of them were smiling down on me. When the company was on track, Emily, now a university student, told me she was dating someone, the heir to a prominent bank. I thought I had to dress appropriately for the meeting. I came in my uncle's old pickup, which is more valuable to me than any luxury car. So I was a bit upset. "Sorry about that." After finishing my story, Emily's future father-in-law, John, looked bewildered. He seemed desperate to save face. Such a good story can't be true in real life. If you think it's a lie, feel free to check. It's all on our website. When I said that, John started fiddling with his cell phone. It seemed he soon realized the truth. John visibly deflated, losing his previous bravado. He might have acted like he was the CEO of a mega bank, but I knew he was just a branch manager. He probably tried to puff himself up more than usual to show his status. To deliver the final blow to John, I added, "The cell phone you're holding, it's from that well-known international company, isn't it? That means it probably contains parts made by our company. Thank you for using it." After those words, John never spoke again. I might have talked a bit too much. But surprisingly, it seemed that the rest of the family took it well, except for John. However, Emily seemed displeased and cautioned me on the ride home. "You didn't have to tell them everything. Really. Sorry about that, but isn't it also wrong to speak like he did? If we let that pass, it's like denying your mother's existence too." "No, I was happy you talked about it, but you didn't have to bring up my childhood stories there." Emily blushed with embarrassment. "Is that so? But for me, it's important. Uncle Steve, Ashley, and you. I wanted to properly convey the story of the people who supported my life." We both fell silent. The good thing about the old pickup is that the engine noise drowns out the silence. The smell of oil and the sound of the engine always bring me peace. I'm thinking of calling off the engagement with that guy. Really. His father was like that, but the son seemed earnest. Yeah, he is earnest, but sometimes he treats me like a secretary or a housemaid, asking me to fetch things, memorize his schedule. I don't want to do that. Emily looked downcast. Besides, I actually want to become an engineer and not finish college. I want to create new technologies to make people happy. But he doesn't seem to like the idea of me being a researcher. Maybe because I'm a woman. Live the life you love. I remembered what my wife, Ashley, once told me. Believe in yourself. Do what you love. I believe what you want to do is right. I somehow understood how Ashley must have felt when she said that to me. Time passed, and as expected, Emily's engagement was called off. The other family must have been upset about losing face. Emily seemed secretly relieved to report the cancellation, which I thought was for the best. By societal standards, one might say an opportunity for a splendid marriage was lost, but true happiness lies beyond that. Emily later graduated from college and went on to graduate school in Germany. I was prepared, but it was still hard to say goodbye. We won't be apart forever, so don't look so gloomy. But still, it's hard when my daughter leaves home. Okay, I'm off then. Take care. Call me if anything happens. Waving, Emily passed through the gate to board her flight to Germany. Months after our farewell, which I had bravely faced, I felt a deep sadness in the emptiness of Emily's room. To distract myself from the loneliness, I turned to my usual companion, the amateur radio. This long-standing habit, starting from the time I moved in with my uncle, had become a part of me. Hello CQ, hello CQ, hello CQ, this is JA4TOC. If anyone can hear me, please respond. Over. Soon, I received a call from a station in Germany. It was a woman's voice. Hello CQ, hello CQ, hello CQ, this is W2JA7KR, go ahead. I wondered when she had gotten her radio license. At first, I thought my loneliness made me mishear. But there was no mistake. I responded with all my being, not to miss a single word from my beloved daughter's voice coming from this magical box. W2J7KR, thank you for your response. I'm so glad you're doing well. With love from your father. Let me be clear, this marriage is off the table. Including myself, the three of us looked at Thomas, who was supposed to become my father-in-law, with expressions of surprise. Listening to your story, it seems you folks are nothing but poor. Don't think you can marry into money and ride the gravy train here. No, that's not it. I just wanted to marry Tyler because my sister Sienna pleaded desperately with Thomas. Of course, she must have discussed and decided this with her fiancé Tyler. Even from observing them today, it's clear that they care deeply for each other. Nobody should have the right to dictate their future. Biting her lip tightly, Sienna had a look of endurance on her face. Sienna. In front of the distraught young couple, Thomas wore a satisfied smile. Then, looking back and forth between me and Sienna, he said mockingly, "Orphans and poor people are out of the question." I returned home and sent an email to a certain client. Despite it being the weekend, I received a prompt reply. The content of the message conveyed their joy. Using a certain work project, I came up with a plan to make Thomas approve Sienna and Tyler's marriage. However, it wouldn't be easy. If Sienna married under these circumstances, just pleading with Thomas, she would likely face hardship in her new family. To prevent that, I had to take some action. My name is Alex. Just the other day, I celebrated my 32nd birthday and was telling my sister, maybe it's time to start going to the gym. She coldly replied, as if you'll stick with it. Despite her sharp tongue, I still vividly remember the day my sister Sienna was born. She came into the world when I was in first grade. It was a fall day, the scorching heat of summer had passed, and the warm sunshine felt comforting, accompanied by a cool breeze. I remember visiting my mother in the hospital after school and tentatively touching the tiny hand of the newborn Sienna. Her small hand was warm and slightly moist. My heart raced, and I looked up at my mother. She was smiling joyfully and gently lifting the baby. I remember the sweet, damp smell. "He is your brother," my mother said, and the baby's tiny, red face seemed to smile. The following years might have been the happiest of my life. I fondly recall Sienna crawling after me as I was about to leave for school, and the first time she called me Alex. However, more often than not, it was me who ended up crying, whether it was from having my carefully assembled toy trains wrecked or getting hit in the face with a thrown block. I even cried when my cherished childhood stuffed animal got all sticky from her drool, but now, it's a fond memory. As she grew, we could do more things together. Like the time we were running toy trains from one end of the house to the other, and our dad, just back from work, tripped over them. Or when we both ended up covered in mud after falling in a puddle after the rain. I'll never forget the look of astonishment on our mother's face when she saw us from head to toe in mud. Of course, we were promptly marched to the bathroom. There were countless memories like these that I could go on about. I'm sure these memories will be among those flashing before my eyes when my life comes to an end. But that happiness didn't last forever. It was a rainy winter day. I was in the 6th grade, and Sienna had just turned 5. My father had left without an umbrella, so my mother went to pick him up by car, leaving Sienna and me home alone. It was only a 10-minute drive. After dinner, Sienna and I were relaxing in the living room, watching TV and chatting about trivial things. But even after an hour had passed, our parents hadn't returned. I remember hearing the distant sound of an ambulance siren and looking out the window. It was a car accident. A car had skidded on the wet road and crashed into my parents' car. I was stunned as the police explained what happened. I didn't know how to explain to Sienna, who kept asking why and how. I wanted to ask the same questions myself. I think I was just overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we had lost. During that time, the adults around us took care of various procedures, and Sienna and I were taken in by relatives. Their home had no other children, and fortunately, they treated us well. But I always felt it's not our place, and I wanted to leave with Sienna as soon as possible. It was around the time I entered high school. At 15, I made up my mind to leave with Sienna. Our relatives tried to persuade us to stay, but I insisted. Without their consent as guardians, we couldn't rent a house at our age. Fortunately, we had some money from our parents' insurance and inheritance. So began our life, just Sienna and me. That continued until Sienna graduated from college and got a job. When she told me she was moving out because she had found a job, I felt lonely but also proud, like a parent watching their child grow up. And now, my little sister is about to get married. My sister's partner is Tyler. They've been dating since their student days and are close in age. Recently, Sienna said she wanted to invite both Tyler's father and me for a dinner meeting. It's probably for the formal introductions between both families for the marriage. He's the man my dear sister is going to marry, after all. Wanting to make a good impression on his parents, I splurged a bit more than usual on a suit and prepared for the dinner. However, on the day of the dinner, Tyler's father, Thomas, didn't show up at the agreed time. Tyler and I had already greeted each other by then. He appeared nervously but was teased by Sienna, which made him blush awkwardly. He seemed like a nice, kind-hearted guy. Yet, Tyler was anxiously trying to contact his father, who was nowhere to be seen. About 30 minutes later, a man in a well-tailored suit arrived without any hint of hurry. "Dad, I told you the time of the appointment. If you were going to be late, you could have at least said something. What's this all about? Didn't I tell you I had a business meeting this morning? Unlike you kids, I'm busy." Thomas, his father, didn't apologize for being late and instead scolded his son Tyler. Tyler couldn't retort and apologized to Sienna and me in a low voice, saying, "I'm sorry, my father. I felt sorry for Tyler and wanted to support him. Tyler really worried about you, but please don't worry about us." Kids who can't shake off their student mentality don't understand the importance of work. I tried to be nonchalant in response, but it seemed unnecessary. Unlike his son, Thomas had no intention of apologizing to us. I am currently in charge as the head of product planning. Being a leader means constantly cleaning up after incompetent subordinates. You wouldn't understand. That sounds tough. Suddenly, he started ranting about work, leaving me bewildered. These young people nowadays, Thomas sighed dramatically. They're all talk about compliance, doing barely any work, and quickly leaving at their regular hours. I wonder if I'm included in his definition of young people. Not knowing what to say, I responded vaguely with, Perhaps my response annoyed him, as Thomas, with a frown, continued. When they rarely do overtime, they make such a fuss about needing permission. Just do the overtime on their own. I thought that doing overtime without a supervisor's permission would be a compliance violation, but I didn't retort, seeing the conversation was dragging. While I understand that being a department head in a big corporation is tough, I can help but think about the challenges his subordinates must face under such a boss. We've initiated a collaboration project with another company, and one of our younger team members has taken the lead. Thomas continued his story. They're set on hiring this trendy designer for the packaging, questioning why we should pay such high fees for a designer when in-house capabilities should suffice. Tyler, seeing his father's rant going on endlessly, interjected. "Dad, let's set aside work talk for now. Today, Sienna's brother, Alex, made the effort to come and introduce himself. You know, he successfully redirected the conversation. Indeed, today was meant for discussing the marriage. Until then, we hadn't even completed basic introductions or exchanged pleasantries. It seemed he had little interest in us. This is Sienna and her brother, Alex." Tyler introduced us, and we greeted him in turn. "Alex, I apologize for my father's delay. This is my father, Thomas." Tyler, unlike his father, greeted me with proper respect. Thomas, on the other hand, assessed us as if evaluating, then remarked, "You are her brother. Are your parents not present?" "Dad, I've told you before, Sienna's family lost their parents early, and Alex has been like a parent to her ever since," Tyler reminded him. Right, that explains it." Thomas abruptly stopped himself, then, turning to me, commented, "To think you'd attend a marriage introduction in such an affordable off-the-rack suit, but if no one told you, it's understandable. My choice of suit for the day was criticized. True, it wasn't a high-end or bespoke suit, but I hadn't intended to buy something so inexpensive it would invite such remarks. For someone like me, who seldom wears suits, a bespoke option seemed excessively lavish. Ah, I see. Perhaps suits aren't a regular part of your job. Well, yes. You might say I'm in a creative field. I primarily work from home. In that case, it's understandable. No need to go to any special effort just for today. It's merely a marriage introduction, after all. His condescension was palpable, leaving me contemplating my response. I aim to avoid confrontation, to not jeopardize Sienna's relationship with her future father-in-law. Despite his apparent lack of interest in getting along, I was reluctant to escalate tensions. Observing Tyler's unease and Sienna's irritation at his outburst at me, I sought to manage the situation gracefully. Nonetheless, Thomas, indifferent to my sentiments, persisted. So, this home-based occupation of yours, many who claim to be in the creative sector hardly earn much, essentially hobbyists. Surely you are not among them. It's a sensitive topic, but yes, our field does include many who might be considered semi-professional. The creative industry is diverse, with numerous hobbyists possessing near-professional skills. I'm committed to delivering work I can take pride in as a professional. Ultimately, work is about earning, don't you agree? Certainly, it's a multifaceted issue, but earning a livelihood is undeniably crucial. What constitutes work, really? Opinions differ, but balancing passion with income is a common struggle. Precisely. All this talk of fulfillment, but without income, how does one sustain themselves? Don't you think many youths are misguided in this regard? I believe everyone has their own considerations. For me, achieving independence was a significant achievement. I see. Having no parents, you must have started working early. Indeed. Living with my sister, I balanced work and studies. She was immensely supportive around the house. Sienna's an excellent cook, Dad. Tyler, who had been silent during the exchange between his father and me, chimed in when Sienna was mentioned. You should try Sienna's lasagna, Dad. It's exceptional. It's just home cooking, really. Sienna blushed at Tyler's praise, offering a shy smile. Haha, home cooking, you say, as if unfamiliar with the taste of home. Thomas laughed heartily. At his words, Sienna's expression stiffened. Indeed, Sienna had only tasted her mother's cooking until she was 5. She might not even remember it. But that's no excuse for such a comment. As I was about to retort, Thomas continued as if to stop me. If I've offended you, my apologies. But let me be clear, this marriage is off the table. What? The three of us looked at Thomas in shock. From what I've heard, it seems you come from humble beginnings. You can't expect to marry into wealth for an easy life. That's not it. I just wanted to marry Tyler because I love him. Sienna pleaded desperately with Thomas. Of course, she and Tyler must have discussed and decided together. Even from today's interaction, it's clear they care deeply for each other. No one has the right to dictate their future. Say what you will, Tyler might have been easily deceived, but I won't be. I do not approve of this marriage. But Dad, wait. Bringing up Sienna's background now of all times, I've already told you everything. Tyler also confronted Thomas. He probably never expected his own father to oppose him at this point. That's true, but she was your choice, so I thought I'd at least meet her, but she's not suitable for you. Not suitable, what does that even mean? It's my decision who I marry. Tyler stood up for Sienna, confronting Thomas. Tyler, it's okay, Sienna said weakly. Normally, Sienna wouldn't stay silent when faced with such injustice. But this must have been a significant shock. After all, there's nothing she can do about her upbringing now. See, she knows her place far better. It seems the poor do understand their standing. Subtly, I won't be tasting your poor lasagna. Sienna clenched her lips, trying to hold back tears. Sienna. In front of the grieving young couple, Thomas wore a satisfied smirk. Then, looking between me and Sienna, he said mockingly, "Orphans and the poor are out of the question." "Understood. We'll be leaving." I took Sienna's hand, who remained frozen, and looked down, and led her away from there. Sienna, pulled along by me, remained silent as we walked quickly. I couldn't say anything to Sienna either. I couldn't forgive Thomas for hurting my dear sister like this. If it were just me, it would have been fine. I could endure any amount of ridicule. But when Sienna is hurt, it's a different story. Back home, I sent an email to a client. Despite it being a weekend, I received a reply soon after. The message conveyed a client's joy. Using a certain work project, I had an idea to make Thomas approve of Sienna and Tyler's marriage. But it wouldn't be easy. Surely, even if we begged Thomas and got married, Sienna would suffer in her new home. To prevent that, I had to take action myself. Thomas mentioned he was the head of the product planning department. From what Tyler told me, Thomas works for Fulton Sweets, a well-known candy manufacturer familiar to everyone. Though not yet public, there's an ongoing collaboration project between Fulton Sweets and Rocky Mountain Dairy, another major dairy manufacturer. In this time, I, working as a freelance designer, was commissioned for the package design of this collaborative product. Normally, large manufacturers have in-house designers responsible for their product packaging, but this collaboration was outsourced to me. I had previously worked on a project for Rocky Mountain Dairy, and this job came through that connection. Juggling other commitments, I had been unsure about scheduling a meeting, but the email I sent earlier was to propose a date to the contact at Rocky Mountain Dairy. On the day of the meeting, both representatives from Rocky Mountain Dairy and Fulton Sweets, having concluded their business discussions and contracts for the collaboration, invited me to a dinner meeting, which also served as an introduction to all parties involved. And there, as the superior of the Fulton Sweets representative, Thomas was also present. Spotting Thomas already seated at the dining table from afar, I entered the private room with a leisurely pace. "Sorry for being late. Oh, Thomas, you are already here. That's early for you." As our eyes met and I greeted him with a smile, Thomas's face turned visibly pale. "Alex, thank you for joining us today." Ryan, the head of the product planning department at Rocky Mountain Dairy, stood up to take my coat. The last product I designed for Rocky Mountain Dairy became a sensation on social media and sold explosively. Initially skeptical of my design, Ryan has been quite deferential since that product's success. Though their products differ, both Rocky Mountain Dairy and Fulton Sweets are major food manufacturers. However, Rocky Mountain Dairy is larger in terms of sales. In this collaboration, originally proposed by Fulton Sweets, Rocky Mountain Dairy holds more sway. With Ryan already in my corner, I wondered how Thomas would interact with me now. Thomas, still pale, gaped at me as I added, "You must be busy today, right? Taking the time for a meal with me." Thomas, do you have any plans after this?" Ryan chimed in, prompting Thomas to hurriedly deny any. "By the way, do you two know each other?" "Jess, we just met last week. Something about not wanting to eat my sister's pool lasagna." Before I could finish, Thomas loudly interrupted with saying, "Ryan, everyone's here, right? What would you like to drink? I'll take the orders," Thomas said, rushing off like a waiter to take everyone's orders. Ryan watched Thomas's humble act, commenting, "Such a modest man." The dinner proceeded smoothly, and after a while, Ryan stood up to announce, "Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned in the project proposal, we've invited Alex, an external designer, to join us." I looked around and greeted everyone, making sure not to forget eye contact with Thomas. Our company has been indebted to him for a while now, and this time, after we pleaded with him to take on our project, He graciously agreed to do so. Amidst applause, I bashfully responded with a thank you. I look forward to working with you. Did you know? Alex also designed that popular beverage you see in grocery stores. Ryan shared my background without me having to introduce myself. It's both flattering and a bit embarrassing. I never imagined achieving such success as a designer. Back then, I was just struggling to get by, but now I'm grateful for having persevered. After leaving our relative's home, we had some money to live on, but it wasn't a long-term solution. At 15, I balanced high school with evening shifts at a restaurant. After graduating, while many went to college, I chose to work. But while working in the extended role at the restaurant, I pondered if this was really all there was for me. Had I ever truly considered what I wanted to do since losing my parents? As a child, I'd imagined my future career with my family. I loved drawing as a kid. I even won a gold award in a poster contest when I was in elementary school. I enjoyed thinking about how to make my drawings clear and which colors would stand out. Remembering what I loved led me to an interest in becoming a designer. Since losing our parents, all I focused on was how to get by with my sister, who isn't the little kid she used to be anymore. She's quite capable now, helping out a lot at home. And she is even getting cheeky at times. It made me think that maybe it's okay for me to start focusing a bit more on myself. After all, bettering myself could ultimately benefit us both. And so, I made up my mind. While working, I decided to attend a design school. Balancing work and study was tough, both physically and mentally, especially with school assignments cutting into my sleep. But I found studying design incredibly enjoyable. I learned that design is everywhere, in commercial spaces, billboards, posters, furniture, and everyday items, all meticulously planned in terms of color, layout, and design. Designers don't just draw what they like. They create concepts and express them in specifications that others can understand. Through studying color theory and learning how to use design software, I acquired the basic skills needed to be a designer and graduated from the design school. I also quit my job at the restaurant around the same time. There are various career paths for designers, but I landed a job at a small design office. After working there as a package designer for 3 years, I went freelance. Initially, work was scarce, and my first significant project came from an acquaintance from my office days, a new package design for a small sweets shop expanding to New York. I decided to use vibrant colors, a departure from the traditional subdued tones typically used in sweets packaging, hoping to appeal to younger consumers. The result went viral on social media, becoming a hot topic among the youth. I'll never forget the shock of waking up to find my design featured on web news. That packaging even won an award at an annual competition for outstanding package design. From then on, I was constantly receiving work requests. When I first went freelance, I thought about starting my own design studio once things picked up. But success came sooner than expected, and I was able to establish my own design office. Work requests from major companies, including Rocky Mountain Dairy, started to increase, and I was thrilled, albeit overwhelmed. By the way, Alex, is that suit from the new store in New York? The introductions by Ryan had ended, and it was during the casual conversation over dinner, when a young man next to me struck up a conversation. I was curious too. That's the brand recently worn by international celebrities, right? I've seen it on social media. A woman across the table joined in, and soon, others around us began to chime in with "I know that," and really, showing interest. I wore the suit that Thomas had ridiculed as cheap to today's dinner. Despite his comments, this suit wasn't cheap at all. A brand that had recently become popular among international celebrities had just made its debut in the US. This suit was from their first store here, and those in the know could recognize it. Regardless of whether I follow trends, as a designer, keeping up with them is a crucial part of my job. Knowing what's in vogue and predicting what's next. It is vital for creating timely products. The conversation continued pleasantly until Ryan returned to his seat. Alex, speaking of which, that major beverage company's coffee packaging changed a bit ago. I thought it looked great. And then I found out it was your work. Ryan spoke cheerfully, while Thomas sat silently opposite him, not saying a word. Thomas must have heard the conversation about my suit as well. Did you know about this, Thomas? Well, no, I'm not very familiar with these things. Thomas stumbled over his words when Ryan turned the conversation to him. Is that so? Alex is a popular designer these days, so we were a bit worried if he'd take on this project, but now that he has, I'm confident our collaboration will be successful. Having Ryan say that puts a bit of pressure on me, but I've always been grateful for Rocky Mountain Dairy's support, and I want to do what I can to help. I responded while scratching my head, and Ryan looked pleased. Really, I appreciate you saying that. Alex, is this your first time working with Fulton Sweets? Yes, it is my first time, but actually, I'm soon to become related to Thomas through marriage. What? How come? Ryan exclaimed in surprise. Well, I have a sister who's dating Thomas's son. Wow, what a coincidence. Are they getting married? Jess, we've been talking about it recently, right, Thomas? I looked to Thomas for confirmation. Yes, indeed. My son would very much like to marry Alex's sister, Thomas answered with a forced smile. That's wonderful news. Congratulations. Hey everyone, Alex's sister and Thomas's son are getting married. Ryan's announcement was met with a chorus of really and congratulations from around the room, and I expressed my gratitude to everyone. Thomas looked at me with a sour face. In a barely audible whisper, he said, "What are you trying to do?" "I'm not trying anything." I stood up and looked around. "Thank you, everyone. But actually, there's someone who's against my sister's marriage, and it's been troubling us." "What? Why?" came voices of surprise. Thomas whispered harshly, "Hey, what do you think you're saying?" But I pretended not to hear. "Actually, my sister and I lost our parents when we were young. I've been like a parent to her, but at a family dinner with our potential in-laws, it was said that their son marrying someone poor and without parents was out of the question." "That's awful. That's terrible." Murmurs of shock and criticism followed. Thomas fell silent as I continued. "I've managed to establish my own design office, thankfully receiving work. My sister is independent too, and it's frankly painful to have our parents brought up now. That's too much. That's just cruel." Thomas, the target of criticism, seemed to be sweating as he listened to the surrounding voices. "When our parents died, my sister was only 5. We've worked hard to live our lives. And to be told such things when she's about to marry the person she loves, it's just too much." I glanced at Thomas. He was looking down, seemingly listening to our conversation. As a brother, I can't help but want my sister's happiness. I don't want her to give up on marrying the person she loves, nor do I want her to marry into opposition and face hardships. I'm not usually one to talk about myself like this, but for my sister's sake, I felt this was all I could do. This was a sort of gamble. I didn't know how the other party would react, but I took the chance. Wishing for my sister's happiness, I'm asking you, please accept my sister and Tyler's marriage. I slowly turned to face Thomas, guiding everyone's gaze towards him. Everyone's gaze shifted towards Thomas. Thomas looked pale, his eyes wide open. He probably didn't expect me to condemn myself in this way. Just as I was about to directly address Thomas, he stood up abruptly. "Wait, that's not what I meant." Thomas's outburst came with a rush. "I never meant to call anyone poor. I had no idea he was such a distinguished designer." Thomas hurriedly tried to amend his statement. There was no haughty attitude from before. To think that your sister would marry into a humble salaryman's family like ours, I am truly humbled. He stumbled over his words, desperately trying to make amends. That should be enough. I never intended to belittle Thomas. So I gave Thomas my biggest smile. Yes, Thomas is in favor of their marriage, right? The opposition was just from some distant relative of yours. At my words, Thomas looked bewildered. But he quickly grasped the situation and frantically searched for words. Of course, I'm in favor. As for the relatives, I'll take responsibility and persuade them, he said, seemingly drained, and sat down. I had won the bet. I hadn't ruled out the possibility that Thomas might stubbornly oppose the marriage. However, this setting was like home ground for me, filled with people who were favorable towards me. For Thomas, on the other hand, this was a dealing with a major client who trusted me. It should have felt like an away game for him. Sharing my personal story had swayed public opinion in my favor. Thomas was powerless now. Should he make any more comments that hurt my sister, I'd be ready to fight back, though I doubt he'd dare to now. Seeing someone he looked down upon as poor now achieving a higher status and recognition must have been a sobering experience for him. Thomas didn't speak to anyone after that. He probably wanted to leave as soon as possible, but due to the presence of clients, he likely felt compelled to stay and drink, albeit reluctantly. Only Thomas and I knew the truth. In secret, I reveled in the taste of victory. Sienna and Tyler's marriage was now assured. After resolving the issue with Thomas, the wedding date and venue were smoothly arranged, and the couple later visited me to express their gratitude again. I'm truly sorry for what my father did, Tyler said earnestly. Surprisingly, Tyler was the one most upset by the incident. I had thought he wouldn't stand up to his father, but this was something he couldn't overlook. After Thomas's opposition, Tyler was prepared to cut ties with his father to be with Sienna. Ultimately, because Thomas relented, it didn't lead to estrangement, but it seems the feeling of distrust remains unresolved. Tyler seemed to have no desire to get too close to his family home anymore, despite not having a bad relationship with his mother. It appeared that Thomas had lost his son's trust. If my father says anything to Sienna, I'll be the one to protect her next time, Tyler declared in front of me. Sienna chimed in, "It's okay. I won't let it get to me like that again. I'll show him." Their spirited words reassured me of their strength. I haven't seen Thomas since that day. There were meetings for the collaboration project, but I left them to the representatives, avoiding any personal appearance. According to Fulton Suite's representative, Thomas's demeanor has changed somewhat recently. Previously always confident, sometimes even overbearing towards his subordinates, he has suddenly become subdued. The representative said that he'd become almost invisible. Whether my confrontation brought about this change, I can't be sure, but perhaps being put in his place taught him something. On the wedding day, seeing Sienna in her pure white dress brought back a flood of memories, and I couldn't hold back my tears. "You're crying too early," Sienna laughed, tears glistening in her eyes too. I was about to walk down the aisle with Sienna. Since our parents passed, I had been too preoccupied with just surviving to ever imagine such a day. I always thought my life's flashbacks would be filled with memories of our time as a family of 4, but now, this day will undoubtedly be among them. Sienna looked beautiful. The most beautiful and lovely sister in the world. I wished our parents could have seen her. Sienna has grown up so well. She's marrying the very kind Tyler. Sienna is going to be even happier from now on. I wanted to tell our parents that. I've always been happy, Sienna said to me with teary eyes, as if she had read my mind. I was never lonely because I had you. Thank you for everything up until now. I reached my limit. Unable to look at Sienna any longer, I turned around abruptly. My shoulders shook, clearly revealing that I was crying. I managed to keep going because I had Sienna. I told myself it was all for Sienna, but in truth, it was all for me. Thinking it was for Sienna's sake spurred me on. Without her, I probably couldn't have lived this way. I'm the one who should be saying thank her. Thank you, I managed to say, my voice choked with tears, unsure if it reached her properly. The organ sounded, signaling the bride's entrance. As I escorted the bride, I stood in front of the chapel doors. I hoped Sienna would continue to be happy. As if answering my prayer, the grand doors swung open with force, and dazzling light streamed through the stained glass. And there I was, walking down the aisle with a tear-streaked face, a sight that would later become a source of amusement among the attendees. But that's a different story. Newbies should just drink rainwater. The beloved taste of concrete for construction workers. At 44, I transitioned from a construction worker to a corporate job at a construction company. At the welcome party, which was supposed to be for me, Michael, the manager, handed me a cup of water. While everyone else had food and drinks, I had none. It wasn't just Michael who was laughing. The other employees were mocking me with their laughter as well. But this smugness of theirs will only last for so long. Tomorrow, the managers will fall into an unexpected hell. My name is John, and I'm 44 years old. Today marks the start of the new fiscal year, and I'm heading to my new job. My new workplace is Smith Construction, known for its extensive public works project and connections with the town. I hurried towards my new workplace. I've changed jobs before and faced many dangers, navigating through various tough situations. But jumping into a new place as a newcomer at this age still required a bit of courage. In the fresh morning sun, I arrived in front of the office and took a deep breath to calm my nerves. Then, a young man in a crisp recruit suit, looking slightly unreliable, approached me. "Good morning. I'm starting work here today. My name is Daniel. I look forward to working with you." "Good morning. I'm John. I'm also starting today. Nice to meet you." Daniel, the young man who introduced himself, extended his hand toward me with a shy smile. I shook his hand and greeted him. It seemed he thought I was a company employee, given my much older age. My dream is to work on a project that will be marked on the map. I want to be involved in construction that serves people, like building big bridges, roads that create living spaces, and dams that ensure safety, so I can look at a map and remember the achievements of my hard work. Up until a week ago, I was sweating it out in manual labor at a road paving construction site on the outskirts of the city. Blending in with the young construction workers, my age of 44 would show as my body ached from a day's physical labor. Often, I had to go to the site without fully recovering from the fatigue, which was physically demanding. But being thanked for contributing to the city and people was rewarding, and seeing the construction progress up close was fulfilling. It was a job that was both enjoyable and educational, and I took pride in my work. My wife, Lisa, always took care of me when I came home exhausted. Even though it might feel awkward being among the new graduates, she would say, "Stand tall," giving me a strong push on the back. Perhaps due to her job as a nurse, she had a way of offering strict yet kind words to those in need. I was grateful for Lisa, who supported someone like me. I've joined the company today. My name is John. I look forward to working with you. I introduced myself during the greeting session for new employees inside the office. After everyone had their turn and it was all over, the president hurried into the office while on the phone. After hanging up, the president opened his planner, glanced at his watch as if about to make another call, pondered for a moment, and then put away his cell phone. His large figure bustling about in a slightly comical manner. When he glanced around the office and our eyes met, He gave a small nod and a smile. Then, he stood in the center of the office and gave his greeting. Ahem, please relax and listen. I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the new employees who joined us today for choosing our company. No matter the industry or generation, there will be tough times. I want all of you to value human kindness and compassion in your work here. Being thanked for helping others is something anyone would be happy about. Let's build a relationship based on gratitude and trust. We will do our best to make you feel glad you chose our company. So please, I look forward to working with you. I'm not good at formal greetings, so I'll leave it at that. The new employees applauded, and the president lifted a hand before quickly making a call and leaving the office. I was talking to Daniel, who was next to me, about how busy it seemed. "Well, John, you're really tanned." Daniel noticed the difference in color between my face and neck and commented in surprise. "Yeah, up until a week ago, I was working on a road construction site as a construction worker. It was a lively site, right in the residential area south of K intersection. I was just making casual conversation. Then, a man came striding confidently towards us. He seemed to be about the same age as me. He was shorter than me and had a slender build, but his shiny leather shoes and large watch gave off an intimidating vibe. I didn't know his name yet since he hadn't introduced himself, but I wondered if he was an employee or perhaps an executive. "Hey, can you believe we've got a real bottom dweller, a construction worker joining us?" he said without any greeting, scrutinizing me closely. Despite wearing nice things, he was incredibly rude and disappointing. Bottom dweller. Construction work wouldn't get done without workers. It's the workers who sweat it out on site. So I think that's an unfair way to speak. 44 and still a construction worker. Oh, I'm 42, but I've already made it to manager. Humph. Quite bold to tack back to your superior. Just you wait. Tomorrow's going to be fun. He scoffed, then went back to his work without introducing himself. I asked other employees about the man. His name was Michael. He's been with Smith Construction for a long time. This was just the first day, and the future seemed daunting, but I tried not to let it bother me and focused on the work in front of me. The next day, as I greeted him, Michael crossed his arms and smirked at me. "Good morning. You've got some nerve. Well, we'll see what happens when you realize how terrifying I can be. Get to work quickly, bottom feeder. Come on." He piled on menial task after menial task. Why clean the windows now when it's not even dirty? Perhaps it was some kind of policy for Michael. It was hard to understand, but every task is important. If it's a job that someone has to do eventually, I might as well get it done faster than anyone else. I put my all into it and finished in no time. Seeing the menial tasks neatly completed, Michael trembled with frustration. Once his trembling stopped, he then smirked with a malicious grin. "John, go buy coffee for all the employees from the coffee shop. Make sure it's piping hot. But there's an important meeting right after. You have no authority here. Hurry up." Michael loomed over me, eyes wide and spitting as he spoke. It would take at least 15 minutes to drive to the coffee shop and back. Glancing at the clock, I saw the meeting was starting in just 3 minutes. I wouldn't make it to the meeting in time. Other employees who saw our exchange just turned a blind eye. It's natural to fear becoming the target of Michael's anger if they confronted him. I sighed and reached for the office door to leave. Then, Michael added insult to injury. "Ha ha ha, your wife would cry if she saw you like this. From a construction worker to a mere errand boy at 44. What have you been doing with your life? I hope this job lasts longer for you." I suppressed the urge to retort and dashed out without even closing the door. Behind me, I could hear the snickering of the employees spread. The laughter spread contagiously. Whether they were trying to appease Michael or genuinely found it funny was unclear. But with everyone turning against me, The company felt like an uncomfortable place to be. With mixed feelings, I bought coffee for all the employees and ran back to the office. But when I returned, the office was empty, the lights were off, and the doors were locked. It seems Michael had ended the meeting early, and everyone had left. I've been had. With a superior like that, it's no wonder the subordinates are rotten. I couldn't see myself fitting into this environment. A few weeks later, a welcome party for the new employees was organized, presumably by the president, who knew nothing of these issues. The party was set for 6 p.m. at a restaurant a bit away from the company, but it was already past 7. As usual, I was finishing up the overtime work Michael had dumped on me. By the time I arrived at the venue for the welcome party, it was past 8 o'clock. Entering the restaurant, I found the employees already deep in their cups and making a racket. It was a rather upscale restaurant, and their behavior seemed disgraceful. The president was nowhere to be seen. He must still be busy with work. I looked at the empty plates left after everyone had finished eating and decided to at least order a drink. That's when Michael, the manager, found me, put his arm around my shoulder, and led me over to a nearby seat. "John, we've got a seat ready for you." I had a bad feeling about this. The employees were causing a commotion around the seating area, while I was isolated at a table apart from them. I looked at the table and noticed that only a paper cup filled with water was placed there. Then, Michael announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Let the construction worker drink rainwater. It's got that taste you all love. Ha ha ha. Construction workers really are built differently, both in brain and brawn." I was at a loss for words, standing there dumbfounded. Michael's comments and the employees' laughter were extremely unpleasant. Furious, I was on the verge of throwing the water at Michael, but decided to leave right away instead. My wife, Lisa, was on a night shift that day, so I had no one to vent to. Half in desperation, I downed a can of beer alone in the dark kitchen. The next day, not being a regular drinker, I woke up with a headache from just one can of beer the night before. It might have been more due to stress than the alcohol. When I arrived at the office at the usual time, it seemed no one else was there yet. Since the person in charge of the keys hadn't arrived yet, I had no choice but to wait outside. It was strange that nobody was around at a time when usually someone would be. It was almost starting time, but still no one showed up. Was this some new form of harassment? I felt unease brewing in my chest. Then, the executive director arrived, looking flustered. "Good morning, sir." John, good morning. Well, we've got a serious situation on our hands." The executive director unlocked the office, but it was eerily quiet inside, with no one around. "What's the serious situation? Does it have to do with no one being here? It was decided yesterday. Almost all the employees have been given a 3-day suspension." Suspension. He explained that after I had left the night before, the president and the executive director had shown up at the party. This scene they encountered was chaotic, with employees passed out like they hadn't changed their drinking habits since college, and the place was a mess from spilled drinks and food. The president had reprimanded them on the spot. They apologized to the staff of the restaurant and made each employee apologize individually. It seemed the employees sobered up then and realized the gravity of their actions. The president noticed I wasn't there, asked about it, and learned about my earlier encounter with Michael. Furious, he gave all present a 3-day suspension from work on the spot. "Does that mean for the next 3 days, it'll just be the part-timers and me? Hold on, I'm here too." Turning around at the voice, I saw Daniel, the new employee, out of breath. "Are you talking about last night? I can't handle my liquor, so I was out cold pretty quickly. I left before John arrived, and today, I overslept and just barely made it. I thought I was in trouble, so I contacted a coworker. only to hear about Michael's misconduct and the president's fury at the employees' drunken antics. Man, I didn't see any of it and managed to come to work as usual. Not sure if that's good or bad." Daniel gave a sheepish, unreliable smile. But I couldn't help but find him likable. The executive director sighed in exasperation. "Well, it's past starting time, Daniel. Time management is key. But let's let it slide today, given the circumstances. Actually, this might be a good opportunity to talk to you about something regarding the president and John." Something happened between John and the president. The executive director once again explained the situation. "It turns out that my recruitment to Smith Construction was a direct initiative by President Smith himself. President Smith and I have known each other for a long time, dating back to when I was still in my teens. Over 20 years ago. Back then, President Smith was gaining experience at another construction company in preparation to take over his family's business, Smith Construction, and he was my supervisor when I joined as a new graduate. He took care of me in many ways, and it was through his wife's introduction that I met my wife, Lisa. We had interactions that involved our families, and he often took me out for drinks. We would discuss our work for hours on end. A few years later, President Smith left the company to succeed his father as the president of Smith Construction. He always appreciated my proactive attitude, my qualifications, and above all, my character. Someday, I want you to join Smith Construction. That's what Mr. Smith told me. I strongly agreed with Mr. Smith's philosophy and shook his hand firmly. After that, I engaged in various construction-related jobs and gained a wealth of experience. This led to my well-prepared entry into Smith Construction. Learning how his key recruit had been treated, President Smith was furious not just with Michael but with the other employees as well. He lectured them about their shameful behavior, not fitting for professionals or decent human beings, regardless of their reasons for targeting me. He wanted them to reflect on their actions and plan to hold individual meetings with everyone during the suspension period to retrain them. Fitting all these individual meetings into his already tight schedule showed his dedication and concern for others, embodying the ideal I aspired to. After the executive director finished speaking, Daniel remained silent, looking down. Then, he began to speak softly, bit by bit. "I've been thinking that maybe it was my fault for mentioning John's tan on the first day, which Michael overheard. I never thought such a small comment could lead to such a big issue. I've seen how Michael and the others treated John, but I felt helpless. I was afraid of becoming the next target if I said anything." Daniel suddenly covered his mouth and rushed to the bathroom. It was unclear whether it was the lingering effects of last night's alcohol or if it was the mental strain manifesting physically. Daniel is a considerate and kind-hearted young man. I hoped he wouldn't leave the company over such trivial matters. The executive director left, and the part-time and temporary staff arrived. Then, the office phone rang, and the part-timer who answered said, "It's the president, for John." The part-timer handed me the receiver. "Hello, this is John speaking." "Hey, John, you know, reporting, informing, and consulting are the basics of our work, right? I apologize for that. I spoke with Michael this morning. Turns out he was jealous of you, for some petty reason." Really? Michael had seen President Smith smiling at me during the new employee introductions and feared that, despite his longer tenure at Smith Construction, the president, whom he revered, preferred a newcomer like me. Michael, humiliated by being reprimanded in front of others by the president, had shared everything quite candidly on the phone that morning. It seemed everyone had underestimated me, thinking I had only experience as a construction worker and not in design or supervision. That wasn't the case. I'm also experienced as a supervisor. President Smith had explained why he had hunted me, highlighting my skills and character. He asked everyone to use the 3-day suspension to reflect and improve their character, in line with the company's philosophy. While working, I reflected on my time since joining the company. Indeed, I had just silently followed Michael's orders without ever sharing anything about myself, nor had I tried to bridge the emotional gap to gain recognition. Perhaps I was also at fault. Just then, President Smith entered the office. "Sorry, John, for the trouble. No, I should have spoken up to you or Michael. It's my fault for assuming the worst and keeping my distance without trying to communicate." Right. The absence of reporting, informing, or consulting makes things dysfunctional. It's natural to have different opinions, but we all, including myself, neglected the effort to align them. My apologies. I should have handled it better. I'm sorry. President Smith burst into laughter, a hearty and robust sound. "You haven't changed a bit, John. You never let anyone be the bad guy. That's what I've always liked about you." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment, but I found myself laughing along with his laughter. My encounter with President Smith dates back to when I was in middle school. At that time, the area where I lived was struck by a major earthquake. I was asleep in my room on the second floor early in the morning when the violent shaking started, leaving me trembling helplessly. Our house, being newly built, didn't suffer major damage, and thankfully, my family was safe. The radio broadcasted news of widespread fires and the dire situation in surrounding areas. Peering cautiously outside, I could see smoke rising in several places in the distance. The roads were cracked like clay sculptures, old houses had collapsed, and fallen utility poles had crushed a station wagon 3 houses down. I wonder if Bridge A is okay. If it's gone, our town will be completely cut off," my father muttered, trying to contact his workplace, colleagues, and neighbors, but the lines were down for a while. Our town, nestled in the mountains and separated from the bustling areas by a river, relied heavily on Bridge A. Without it, we'd be isolated, with no access to convenience stores, supermarkets, gas stations, or hospitals. After some time, our neighbor called out from their window. It seemed that our neighbor's family was also safe. Like us, they were without water, gas, and electricity, and had no means of communication. They also mentioned that the old Bridge A had indeed collapsed. However, they heard that a helicopter had come to the school to transport critically ill patients and that relief supplies were being delivered there, suggesting we gather at the school if needed. Those uncertain days dragged on. Eventually, along with a box of relief supplies, we received a letter. It was an announcement about the temporary construction of Bridge A. The letter stated that there were plans to build a temporary bridge until the collapsed one could be properly repaired, due to the urgency of the situation. A construction company from another region had stepped forward to take on the task. At the end of the letter, in rough handwritten letters, it said, "We are here for you." At the time, I didn't know who had written it, but later, I realized it resembled President Smith's rough handwriting. My family and neighbors were encouraged, saying this brought them hope. After that, the bridge was rapidly constructed, and I went to see the progress every day. Workers effortlessly carried heavy parts, skillfully operated machinery as if they were their own limbs, and the leader gave precise instructions in a loud voice. They all seemed like heroes, more impressive than any movie star. I aspired to be like them someday. When the bridge was completed, I was so moved that I almost cried with joy. I made up an excuse to go to the supermarket for my mother and hurried to the bridge. There stood a large man in work clothes and a helmet. When he took off his helmet and looked back at the bridge, I couldn't help but thank him. "Thank you for fixing the bridge." He turned around in surprise, then smiled. "I want to do the same kind of work as you. I want to build and repair roads and bridges to help people." Thank you. Hearing that makes all the hard work worthwhile. It took some time to get the construction started due to all the paperwork, but I'm glad it's finally completed. If you still feel the same when you're older, get in touch. We can work together then." With that, he wiped away his tears and handed me his business card with both hands. It bore the name Smith. That was my first encounter with Mr. Smith. Afterward, I dedicated myself to filling the gaps in my knowledge, studying harder than I ever had before. I went on to college, where I studied civil engineering and architecture. In my senior year, I contacted the number on the business card Mr. Smith had given me. He spoke to the president and HR department of the company he was with at the time, asking them to hire me. And so, I secured a job at that construction company. Working together for a while, I got to know Mr. Smith better, and he got to know me. There were times when he was tough on me, but there was always a reason, and it was a learning experience about humanity. As I grew, Mr. Smith took great care of me. We built a solid relationship of trust. Reminiscing about the past, I was motivated anew to give my all at work. The next day, it had been raining continuously since the night, and a heavy rain and flood warning was issued on the news. A linear rain band had formed over the entire area, unleashing relentless, torrential rain as if a bucket had been overturned. The office phone rang, and after Daniel spoke for a while, he turned to me in a panic, the call still on hold. "It's from the municipal office. They say a road has been damaged and emergency vehicles can't get through. They're asking if we can check it out." "Where is it?" "About 7 miles north of M intersection, along the road." "I'll head there right now. Please inform the president." Yes. Smith Construction had a contract with the city to respond in times of disaster. I grabbed my jacket, opened the office door, and ran to my car in the pouring rain. Using an umbrella seemed utterly pointless. Arriving at the site, I found the road leading to a mountain village had collapsed. An ambulance was stranded, leaving the village isolated. Why did it have to be today? I was eager to start the recovery work, but we were short on manpower. As I was racking my brain, a truck driven by the president arrived. Upon closer inspection, I saw some employees were also on board. It seemed the president, who had been in a meeting, received Daniel's call and gathered the employees, despite their suspension. Thankfully, while few in number, more is better than just one person. Then, Michael's car appeared. Caught by surprise, I watched as Michael and the suspended employees rushed over and immediately apologized to Mr. Smith and me. "We're terribly sorry for our foolishness. We've reflected on our actions. We forgot what's truly important as humans and caused trouble for both you and John. Please let us join the recovery efforts. We still want to be of help to others." In the rain, Michael apologized, unconcerned that his shiny shoes and large watch were getting thoroughly soaked. Mr. Smith and I exchanged glances and told them. I was really annoyed at the time, but now's not the moment for that. Let's work together. Right. Mr. Smith nodded and began issuing instructions to the employees. Thanks to the employees who continued to arrive, we were able to perform emergency repairs on the road, allowing the ambulance to pass through safely. It seems that the injured were successfully transported to the hospital. By then, the rain had stopped and a rainbow stretched across the sky. We wiped off our sweat and our dirty work clothes. "John, good job. Are you okay?" Daniel asked tentatively as we returned to the office. "Yeah, we managed to clear the way for the ambulance." "Oh, well, it's not just about the road," I called Michael. "Really?" I was taken aback and looked at Daniel. I was scared of what he might say, and I thought about not calling him, but when I heard the ambulance couldn't get through, I knew personal feelings couldn't come into it, and I was desperate. "Thank you for that." Other employees seemed to have arrived at the office too. Michael apologized to me again. I did something inexcusable. I was annoyed that the newbie was getting along with the president and thought it was hindering my promotion. Honestly, I saw it as a threat, but today, seeing John work at the site, I realized his skills are genuine. There's no way I can match him. Our levels of experience are just too different. I wish John could become our supervisor." Hearing this, President Smith patted me on the back from behind. "You've earned their respect with your skills. Well done." Feeling everyone's eyes on me, I was a bit embarrassed. "Listen up, everyone. I'm thinking of appointing John as the vice president. I want him to take over Smith Construction after I retire. Any objections?" "Of course not. It's frustrating, but there's no one else but John who can analyze and execute with a broad perspective, capable of taking over from a president who manages everything personally beyond just administrative tasks." As Michael clapped, the other employees followed suit. Wow, I was taken aback since I hadn't expected this, but being acknowledged and accepted felt incredibly rewarding. Michael had a soft smile I'd never seen before. That night, when I got home, my wife Lisa greeted me. "Welcome back. The rain was quite something today, wasn't it?" "I'm home." "Yeah, it must have been tough on your end too." "It was busy. There was this boy who got injured in the rain, from a village in the mountains. He slipped and hurt himself. His father tried to take him to the hospital by car, but the roads were impassable, so they had to go back home. But when his pain worsened and he started sweating and looking pale, his mother realized something was wrong and called an ambulance. But you know, the ambulance couldn't get through either, right? So they had to wait for instructions over the phone from a doctor until the emergency services could get there. By the time the paramedics arrived, his condition had stabilized, and he was quite lively when they brought him in. And then, listening to Lisa, I recalled the events of the day. The boy waiting for the ambulance was from the village. Hearing he was safe brought me relief. And then, the boy said that he felt better just as the doctor instructed over the phone. It's like magic, isn't it? He said he wants to be a doctor like that when he grows up, to help people in trouble. His eyes were sparkling. Yeah, people who work hard always look cool. The boy reminded me of myself from the past, and it felt nostalgic. I had entered the industry admiring Mr. Smith, and my dream had come true as I got to work under him. I wished I could tell my younger self not to worry because dreams do come true. The construction guys worked hard too, in places you can't see. Really? Seeing Lisa's surprised face, I laughed. We had been involved in repairing a road damaged by the recent heavy rain. We were also tasked with replacing an old, large bridge, and the bridge was to be given a new name. The office was buzzing with suggestions for the bridge's name. Shouldn't it be Smith Bridge? That sounds a bit too pushy. What about Archline Smith? It's got a modern ring to it. Haha, it feels like we're being judged on our taste. I wondered if the people before us had struggled with decisions like this, and it was a profound thought. Our creations would remain on maps. The culmination of our efforts and hard work would become the foundation that protects and supports people. There could be no greater happiness. With pride, I resolved to continue this work into the future. Just like the always busy Mr. Smith. How was the story? Subscribing to the channel will motivate us for future video production. See you in the next video. I can fathom what attracted her to such a modest man. Being married to someone with limited means must be challenging, said a Harvard graduate classmate, looking down on me and scoffing at our reunion. Moreover, he pushed me and even went as far as to spill his drink on me. Dad, what are you doing here? However, right after that, my daughter arrived in a luxury car to pick me up, and the situation dramatically changed. My name is James. As a child, I miraculously survived a near-drowning incident during a trip to the river with my parents, thanks to the quick actions of those around us who saved me. I learned that it was a combination of people who rescued me, performed CPR, called for help in a moment's notice, and provided treatment and emotional support. Eventually, I aspired to become someone who could save others, just like those who had saved me. And so, My first step towards that dream was pursuing a career in medicine. From that day, I dedicated myself to my studies and eventually got into Harvard Medical School. However, there, I became the target of a classmate named Michael. Just because you're a bit smart and everyone admires you, you think you're better than us. Michael taunted me with his friends. Is that so? But I have no interest in engaging with you, Michael. Don't act so superior. Just you wait. I had no intention of clashing with Michael, nor did I see him as an adversary. Perhaps that irritated him even more, and Michael left with a threatening remark. From then on, Michael started to harass me. But no matter the harassment, I was so focused on my goal to become a doctor that I paid him no mind. However, one day, an incident made it impossible to continue as before. The company went bankrupt. I'm truly sorry, James. My father's company had gone bankrupt. My father, apologizing and looking downcast, had visibly lost weight. I was so engrossed in my studies that I hadn't noticed how much pressure my father was under. Realizing this, I was stunned. Please forgive me for not being able to support your education. How could you say that? Family is more important than anything else. Now it's my turn to support you and Mom. Startled by my father's words, I responded and placed my hand on the shoulder of my downtrodden father. Hearing my words, my father was moved to tears. My mother also cried next to him. At that moment, I made a certain decision. It's a shame to lose such an excellent student like you, but if it's for your family, it can't be helped. I'm sorry, Professor Thompson. Thank you for everything up until now. After dropping out of Harvard, I went around expressing my gratitude to those who had supported me. I decided to give up on becoming a doctor and to start working in order to support my father and mother. The next day, I immediately started job hunting and was fortunately hired by a major company. And I worked hard for the sake of my father and mother. James, thank you. I'll start looking for a job too. Don't push yourself too hard. Take it at your own pace, Dad. Seeing me work hard, my father gradually began to regain his spirits. I occasionally thought back to when I had to drop out of the Harvard, but I had no regrets. As long as my parents were healthy and happy, I continued to work hard and eventually climbed up to the position of department manager. It was around that time that I met a certain woman. James, you're always working hard. Please have some coffee. Thank you, Christine. Christine, who had joined the company a few months ago, brought coffee to my desk. She was incredibly attentive and had a bright personality, making her popular within the company. At the same age of 30 as me, I found myself drawn to Christine. Hey, if you're up for it, would you like to go out for a meal with me? Of course, I'd love to. One day, she happily accepted my invitation to dine out. From there, we hit it off, and as we went out to eat more frequently, I took the plunge and confessed my feelings to her. Do you really think I'm good enough? Being in a relationship with you feels somewhat presumptuous. Christine modestly downplayed herself when in front of me, seeming a bit less confident. I shook my head. You're being modest. I like you, including your modesty. I want to ask you again, will you be in a relationship with me, with marriage in mind? Upon hearing this, Christine smiled shyly. From that day on, we officially became a couple. As we continued to date, met each other's parents, and eventually got married. After some time, we discovered Christine was pregnant. It's going to be a girl. We'll name her Elizabeth. Months later, Christine named our newborn daughter Elizabeth. Her big eyes were distinctive, and she was as cute as an angel, captivating us completely. I adored my daughter. I couldn't be more grateful to Christine for giving birth to Elizabeth. Elizabeth grew up healthy and happy, receiving love from both of us. Dad, you know so much. How come? Maybe because I studied a lot. I once dreamed of becoming a doctor, you know. Years later, when Elizabeth, now 5, casually asked, she was very curious. Why didn't you become a doctor if it was your dream? I had to give up on that dream, I guess. Now, we better hurry to daycare, or you'll be late. Okay. I quickly wrapped up the conversation and urged Elizabeth to get ready for daycare. I thought there was no need to explain all the details to her. Well then, have a good day. See you later. As Christine came to the entrance to see Elizabeth off to daycare, Elizabeth cheerfully waved back. Watching this scene, I couldn't help but smile fondly. Decades later, Elizabeth grew up to be a fine adult and moved out to live on her own. That's when I received a letter at home. An invitation to a reunion. It was from my Harvard classmates, inviting me to a reunion happening in a few months. Despite the harassment from Michael during my university days, I had friends with whom I was close. They must have remembered me, even though I dropped out midway, and sent me the invitation. While feeling nostalgic, I discussed it with Christine, and she said, "Go ahead, it'll be fine." With Christine's approval, I looked forward to meeting everyone after so long. Finally, the day of the reunion arrived. Elizabeth, who happened to be visiting home, drove me to the venue along with Christine for a meal. "Dad, I'll come back here to pick you up." "Are you sure? It's been a while since you've been home, and I don't want to use you as a driver." Since Elizabeth mentioned she would come to pick me up by car for the ride home, I felt a bit guilty but still asked her about it. Then, Elizabeth, with a beaming smile, said, "Don't hesitate. The world is a bit unsafe these days, and I want to do this. While you're enjoying the reunion, Mom and I will have a nice meal." "All right, thank you, Elizabeth. You two be careful and have fun." "Take care at the reunion, Dad." With that, we parted ways in front of the reunion venue. I watched Elizabeth's car until it disappeared from sight, then, with determination, made my way into the venue. Guided by the staff, I opened the doors to the hall where my classmates, who had already arrived, were gathered. "What, James? I thought you were someone else for a second, but it's you, James. Long time no see. How have you been?" Classmates who recognized me rushed over. We're all in our late 50s now, but I could still see the remnants of our Harvard days, and I was instantly filled with nostalgia. "James, after dropping out of the Harvard, you have some nerve showing up here." "Michael." As I was catching up with everyone, Michael arrived with his entourage. Immediately, the unpleasant memories of Michael surfaced, and my expression darkened. "You're still getting all the attention, but just so you know, I was the one who sent you the reunion invitation. Did you think it was sent by one of your buddies by mistake?" Michael started laughing loudly with his cronies. Shocked by this revelation, I was at a loss for words. Seeing my reaction, Michael laughed again, enjoying himself. "Idiot, living in a fantasy world. This is a stage set to humiliate you. You quit the Harvard because you were poor, right? Even with a smart head. Being poor is just unfortunate. This guy, he seems to have a wife. I heard it when he was talking with his friends earlier. Seems like someone inside knows her, and they said she's quite beautiful." One of Michael's cronies, who had been eavesdropping on our conversation, whispered to him. Hearing this, Michael smirked again. "Well, she must really have peculiar tastes to be attracted to someone as shabby as you. Being the wife of a poor man must be so pitiful." Michael scoffed. My anger began to boil not just for me but for dragging my wife into this. "What have I ever done to you? Huh?" I asked Michael in a low tone, giving him a sharp look. "I'm asking why you can say such awful things so casually." "Because you still annoy me to this day. When we decided to have this reunion, your face popped into my head and I got so irritated. I orchestrated this to make you come, so we could bully you in front of everyone. It's like a continuation of our Harvard days since you ran away back then." Realizing Michael was harassing me again for such a petty reason, I was frankly astounded. but he seemed serious. Michael grabbed a glass of alcohol from a nearby table and splashed its contents on me. Poor people left just right, getting drenched in booze, he said, laughing heartily before grabbing me by the collar and dragging me outside. Now that everyone's seen you're poor, I have no use for you. Don't ever show your face around me again. Michael threw me to the ground and, laughing, turned to go back inside. Just then, a car appeared and stopped in front of us. Initially blinded by the headlights, I couldn't see clearly, but it was a familiar luxury car. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Hearing a familiar voice, I was taken aback. Indeed, it was Elizabeth who had stepped out of the luxury car. "Elizabeth, why are you here? I said I'd come to pick you up, didn't you remember?" Now that she mentioned it, it was the time Elizabeth said she would come. Thinking I had forgotten, Elizabeth puffed up her cheeks, seemingly annoyed. "Sorry, I got caught up talking with friends and lost track of time." "Really now? And you're on the ground, and wet. Are you okay? This smell. Did you get alcohol poured on you?" "It's fine, not something to worry about." Noticing I was drenched in alcohol, Elizabeth was shocked but reached out her hand to help me up. Then, handing me a handkerchief, I thought to myself how considerate my daughter was. "Are these people your friends, Dad?" As I wiped the alcohol from my hair and suit with Elizabeth's handkerchief, she noticed Michael and his group and asked me. At that moment, Michael's demeanor changed upon seeing Elizabeth's face. "You are?" Michael, trembling and turning pale as if afraid of Elizabeth, surprised me with his reaction. Then, Elizabeth, upon seeing Michael's face, smirked mischievously. "Why are you here, Michael? Weren't you supposed to be on night shift today?" Though smiling, Elizabeth seemed angry. "Elizabeth and Michael know each other?" Confused, I asked, and Elizabeth answered. "Know each other? He works at my hospital." Shocked by this revelation, I couldn't hide my surprise. It seemed Michael was also surprised to see Elizabeth and me conversing. "I swap shifts with someone else today, but are you two related? I mean, you share the same last name?" Michael, looking back and forth between Elizabeth and me, asked her. "Yes, that's right. And what of it? What's your relationship with my father? I understand you're one of his university classmates from the fact this is a reunion, but you don't seem like friends." Elizabeth, deducing from the situation that Michael wasn't a friend, glared at him. Michael, panicking, started to make excuses. No, we were friends and got along well back in our Harvard days, right, James?" Saying this, Michael forced a smile and put his arm around my shoulder. Repulsed by Michael's overly dramatic act, I thought he could almost be an actor, but determined not to play into his hands, I shook off his arm. "Stop it. We never had any good memories together, did we? That's what my dad says." After shaking off Michael's arm, I moved next to Elizabeth and glared at him. Under Elizabeth's stern questioning, Michael became even more flustered. Maybe I was the only one who thought we were close. "What are you talking about, Michael? Don't be scared of this woman. Just because they're family doesn't mean they're not poor. Besides, you just got done putting James down, and now what?" One of Michael's cronies, not understanding the situation, blurted out this bombshell, causing Michael to scold him. Then, Elizabeth burst into laughter. "Us, poor. Don't make me laugh. Then how did I get something like this?" Elizabeth gestured towards the luxury car she had arrived in. A bright red Ferrari. The cronies, who hadn't paid attention to the Ferrari before, were taken aback by Elizabeth's remark. "This is my Ferrari, bought with my own money. Who dared to call my father poor?" Elizabeth smiled again, but her words made Michael and his cronies turn pale with fear. Then, one crony pointed at Michael. "You bastard, you sold me out. It's the bed you made. I can't stand talking to someone who grovels to a woman. Let's go." The cronies left Michael behind, saying this. Angered, Michael yelled after them. "She's not just any woman. She's the head of the hospital I work at, damn it." "Well, thank you for the introduction, Michael. Your friends seem to have deserted you though." Elizabeth said this, mocking Michael, who had been abandoned by his cronies. In a fit of anger, Michael inadvertently revealed Elizabeth's true identity, but it seemed his confession did not reach his cronies. "Now, it seems I'll need to have a lengthy discussion with you about the harassment you've subjected my father to. Depending on what you say, I might just have to fire you." "Please, Director, anything but that." I was surprised at Michael's promptness to apologize when Elizabeth threatened him with dismissal. At that moment, I felt the true extent of Elizabeth's influence as the hospital director. "The one you should be apologizing to is my father, not me. Are you senile? James, I truly am sorry. Please forgive me. If I get fired, my parents will scold me." Michael, scolded by Elizabeth and begging me for forgiveness, was so self-centered that Elizabeth and I were beyond words, just astonished. "Look, Michael is truly apologizing. That's disgraceful. Weren't you spouting insults at James just a while ago? Are you incapable of standing up to that woman?" As this commotion unfolded, a crowd of other classmates from the venue came out to the entrance, drawn by the noise. It seemed the cronies who returned inside had spread the word about Michael. Michael had mistakenly thought I was poor and planned this reunion to make an example of me in front of our classmates. However, his plan backfired spectacularly, and he ended up publicly apologizing to Elizabeth and me, crying in front of everyone. The next day, when Elizabeth spoke with Michael, he began to talk as if he had resigned himself to his fate. He confessed to having bullied me during our Harvard days. Furthermore, despite being scheduled for a night shift on the day of the reunion, he had pushed his work onto another doctor to attend the event. This was something heard from the doctor he had burdened. "He thought you were poor because you dropped out of the Harvard halfway through and just assumed it was due to financial reasons." "Well, I can see why he might think that." "That's why you're underestimated," Elizabeth scolded, leading me to reflect. Perhaps I hadn't talked back to Michael enough, which might have contributed to this situation. If my actions led to this situation, then I too am at fault. But Elizabeth didn't forgive Michael for his harassment towards me and decided to fire him. Michael, having been fired, seemed dejected, and I could almost picture his downtrodden appearance. Elizabeth is a Harvard graduate, running her own hospital and a published doctor. Because Elizabeth is a renowned doctor in the medical community, Michael, having made an enemy out of her and becoming the subject of rumors, was ostracized from the medical field. Now shunned by his parents, he's been leading a life filled with part-time jobs. If it weren't for your help, I would still be belittled by Michael. Thank you, Elizabeth. When I expressed my gratitude, Elizabeth oddly responded with a thanks as well. Curious, I asked why, and she shared something unexpected. "Mom told me, you dropped out of the Harvard for the family. If I were in your shoes, I'm not sure I could have made that choice immediately." Listening to Elizabeth, I thought about how talkative Christine was, but appreciated her words. My decision back then was influenced by my experience with the drowning accident. My life, which could have been lost, was saved. So, extending a helping hand to my family, who saved me, seemed only natural. Because of that choice, I found a different path, met my wife, and was blessed with Elizabeth. I had no regrets. Sharing this with Elizabeth, she said she was proud to have me as her father. "You're knowledgeable and worked hard for the family, allowing me to graduate from the Harvard. Being able to help you was also thanks to the support from you and Mom. Have more pride in yourself," Elizabeth said. I already did. Elizabeth, who had grown up so admirably, was my pride. Years later, inspired by Elizabeth, I resigned from the major company I had long worked for and decided to retake the Harvard entrance exam. When I shared my desire to retake the exam with Christine, She initially was surprised but then smiled and supported my decision. Encouraged by this long-dormant dream, I decided to chase it once more. After days of studying and hard work, I was accepted into the Harvard again. Years later, having diligently studied at the medical school, I graduated from Harvard. We did it, Dad. Now you're officially a doctor too. It's all thanks to the support from you and Christine. Thank you so much. I was immensely grateful to my family. Fulfilling my dream of becoming a doctor, I started working at Elizabeth's hospital, helping to save lives alongside her. I never initially thought that what I did for my family would come full circle and benefit me. I vowed to continue being a proud doctor for my family and patients alike.